Welcome to Common Sense Parenting with Pam, the podcast where we simplify parenting with common sense tips, real life scenarios, and a little bit of humor along the way. I'm Pam, and I'm here to help you build the skills and confidence you need to raise happy, resilient, and responsible children. So grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and let's tackle parenting one common sense tip at a time. Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to our podcast episode today. I'm so excited because this is our first episode where we actually have a guest. Usually just have to listen to me talking, but today I have a special guest who actually reached out to me through social media, right? That's how you found me. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Her name is Nancy Perkins. She's a special education advocate. And I am so excited to have you on, Nancy, because we've talked prior to this, and you know that I have experience with family members and dealing with school system and IEPs and all that good stuff. And I was fortunate enough that I knew enough to be dangerous, not too dangerous, but knew enough. But I have followers, a lot of followers that have neurodivergent children that are dealing with IEPs, dealing with school systems, have children with autism. They're overwhelmed. And then you go into an IEP meeting, and then it's like they're speaking a foreign language to you, and you're not sure what they're saying, and you're just floored, and it's so confusing. So when I heard that you are a person who can help families, I was so excited to have you on today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us about yourself. Tell us, first of all, about your background first so people can know where you're coming from. Let's start there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Pam. I'm Nancy Perkins, and I live on Long Island in the New York metropolitan area. I live in a suburb, live and work in a suburb, which is about an hour or so outside of New York City. I have a Master of Social Work degree from Adelphi University, and I am a New York State licensed master level social worker. And I have a variety of social work experiences. I've worked with different populations, but special needs, children with special needs, learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, it's always pulled me like a magnet, even before I became a parent. My child has what we call level 1 autism, what in the olden days used to be known as Asperger's syndrome. I have 11 and a half years of experience working in a special education preschool, and the children in our preschool, they were kind of a mix of disabilities. We had very many medically fragile children that were tube fed, children that had seizure disorders.
I'm fascinated by your background because I connect a lot with you on a lot of things, working in kids with special needs, working in childcare, all those kind of things. What led you to decide I need to advocate for these kids outside of a job working for somebody else? What was that brain change? What led you to that decision?
I don't think it was one particular thing when I think about it. I think it was a series of moves that happened in the different populations that I worked in.
Okay.
It kept happening over and over and over again. That began to plant seeds. So this all took a long time. So, right. All of this, it's not even 1990. And I got my degree in 1989. And so I was moving along. And in the early 90s, I had gone to work in the special education preschool. We did screenings for kids to see if they qualified for services. And if after we had our meeting to discuss evaluation results, the school psychologist and I would do what we called an informing. And we would give our recommendations. So when I was working in the school for 11 and a half years, by then I was very, very, very involved in that.
As a parent, hearing from somebody, your child is diagnosed or labeled, however you want to say it, with this, sometimes it's a shock to the parent, even though you would be like, how did they not know this? How could you not see it? It's really obvious. But as a parent, to maybe suspect it or not be aware of it at all, and then get a diagnosis, or here's what we need to recommend based on this, assessment we've done of your child, that can be a really emotional moment for families. To have somebody who knows what they're talking about and is skilled in it, and you help kind of ease that for the parent because that's hard to hear. That's hard to hear. It's nice to know there's somebody out there like you that can help families with that, those changes that happen. And then, I've had to go up against the schools myself. And we talked about that before, and I'm not going into detail here, but multiple times I've had to go up and advocate for my child with the schools. And not that I'm bashing schools at all. Because what I told the teachers when I had to meet with them that day is we're a team. It's our job to work together to meet this child's needs. It's not just yours, just mine. We're a team. We have to work together to make this work. So tell me well, let's back up. Tell our listeners what exactly you do with the family. Say I'm a family and I come to you and I say, Nancy, my son's just been diagnosed with autism and he's in second grade and the school's talking to me about this thing called an IEP. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what I do. What services is my child entitled to? So kind of take it from there and riff on telling us what it is you do and how you handle it, how people find you.
Well, how people find me is, excuse me, I have a Facebook page, Special Needs Pro,
Okay.
and I also have a website by the same name, and I'm on Threads. If somebody, and I engage, I'm on a lot of different pages, special needs parents pages, and I'll answer people's questions. If somebody says that, what the scenario that you just presented, what I do is I've begun to really assume nothing and start from scratch.
Good.
And I will ask them, I'll say, has your child had an evaluation through the school district? And it depends on what the answer is. If they say, well, no, and this is just hypothetical,
Right.
I'll say to them, well, you need to make a request in writing. And what I always say to parents constantly is, when you're making such a request and you're communicating, always do it in writing.
Mm.
There are two reasons for that. One of them is people are very busy
Mhm.
and they forget. You can't, everybody's very busy, but also there is a saying that if it wasn't written, then it wasn't said. There's a very famous special education lawyer by the name of Pete Wright, and he's an absolute rock star. He lectures, he has a newsletter, his Rights Law newsletter, and I think that's where I read the saying from. If it wasn't written, then it wasn't said. Then, and lawyers probably say that all the time.
Documentation, honey,
Documentation
documentation.
is everything. And so the email is proof positive. You have the timestamp, and you make the request. You are requesting, you want the consent, you want your child evaluated. Let's say, for instance, you think the child has a speech delay. You're requesting a psychological evaluation, educational evaluation, speech and language. If you think maybe a problem with fine motor skills, like, with fingers, hands, occupational therapy. Now I'm going to backtrack for a second because this is something I've heard. I've heard people have said, oh, but his teacher said his speech is fine and he understands them. It's speech and language, because it's not just articulation. It's not just about, do they stutter, disfluency. It's about, what do you understand? What are they
What are they
understanding?
perceiving, the
Right.
perception?
So you make these requests. The districts, they have, the clock starts ticking. Once that request goes out, the clock begins to tick, and they have a certain number of days to either grant your request or they say no. But they can't just say no, sorry, we're too busy. If they say no, they have to provide you with something called a prior written notice, which in Pennsylvania they call it a NOREP. What is it? Notice? I forgot what the acronym stands for, and it goes by different names. But the prior written notice is something that is generated when an action is taken place, when it's accepted or refused, and it's an explanation as to why we're going to do this or we're not going to do this. So that, and they can't just stop you in the hall or call you on the phone and say, we decided we don't need to do it. No,
They have
that
to send
doesn't.
it in writing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Can it be
And
appealed? Can a compare and appeal it? Okay.
I'm getting to that.
Okay,
I'm
go
going
ahead.
to get to that. So if they say, you know what, speech and language, nah, he's fine. No. No, he doesn't really need it. You oh, you're also supposed to be given a document. It's about 49 pages or so called a procedural safeguards notice. It's from your state. That's a very thick document, but it explains what your rights are. So if they say no in the prior written notice, you can say, oh, you don't think he needs a speech therapy evaluation? Oh, you know what? I am making a request in writing for an independent educational evaluation for speech. That is when the speech therapy or there are other evaluations you can ask for, but only one per year. That is something paid for at public expense,
So that's
meaning the
done
district.
by an independent person, not within the school system, and the school has to pay for it. Just want to be
Right,
clear with people listening.
right.
Okay.
The person is they're not employed by the school district, but they are under contract. So either they will either pay for it, or in the case of we have a case of a neuropsychologist out here, you have to right now you have to pay him up front and wait to get reimbursed.
But though these evaluations are needed for the child's benefit to determine what services then the school is responsible for providing. That then
Right.
will go into the document, the IEP. So tell people what an IEP is. We have a lot of people who are not familiar with this terminology. So explain what an IEP is for us.
One more thing before I explain the IEP. If you ask for an independent educational evaluation, the district, they only have two choices. That's another case of you can't say sorry. They either grant it and give you a list of providers, and you don't have to choose the list of providers, or they say no, we've decided, according to our PWN, and we're going to take you to due process because we think everything is fine. Now, an IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. What it means is that you have to look at first of all, what are the child's needs? Based on the evaluations that we have, what are his needs? What's going on? How did he score? And not just academics, but social emotional. Is there some behavioral? Is there anything we saw with executive functioning? So then now how do we put goals together? What do we do as far as that's concerned? And the very last thing to we come up with is placement. A big thing, and parents have heard this, is that they've heard this in meetings. Oh, sorry, tough luck. We don't have that here. We'll have to put you in this placement. And so we don't do that here is not if it's not in your district and you really cannot service the child in your district, then the onus is on the district to look for an appropriate out of placement district for the child. So you can't say we don't do that here. It's very difficult. It's very the only way I can put
Hard.
it that
It's just hard for
it's
everybody
very
involved. Yeah.
it is it's
I can see why. I hear a lot from teachers in the public school system who have children placed in their classrooms or have terrible behavioral needs. They're not able to met in the classroom. They're extremely disruptive to the whole classroom. And then the teacher's like, we have to evacuate all the kids out of the room for this one child throwing a fit in our room. So again, it goes back to these expectations on these teachers who don't have the skills and the training they need to best meet that child's needs. And it's not fair to the teacher. It's not fair to the child. It's not fair to the other children in the classroom. It's a tough spot. Sometimes it's just a tough position to be in all around. But that's why we have people like you. So back up. So just so people are clear, I want to make sure everyone's clear. You are now on your own. You have your own business,
Mhm,
Special Needs
mhm.
Pro. And so people contact you and they pay you to be like the liaison to review notes. Tell us what all you do when people are hiring you to advocate for their child.
Well, what I do is I will ask if, assuming somebody has an IEP, and let's say a meeting is coming up, I'll say, please send me the most recent IEP and any reports that you have, medical reports or, anything outside. If you had an outside neuropsych eval, and I'll ask them to send me pertinent documents, and I review everything. and I'm looking for red flags. My colleagues and I, we have our recommendations, but I'll look for red flags in IEPs, and I'll see things like things that don't make sense. I've seen the wrong child's name on IEPs more than once, where it get finds its way into a report where you can tell it's been cut and pasted, and it's just, wait a minute, and I'll circle it. And I make no bones. I'll bring it up at the meeting, and I will say to the administrator, the wrong name is there. I'll say to the parent beforehand, the wrong name is in the report. And so they have to fix it. This has happened more than once where the wrong name has been found its way inside of a report. And so that's really not that's not good at all. So they come to me. If I can't help them, I'll tell them. And I tell them first off, I'll say to them, so the first thing I tell them is that I'm not an attorney, because there are people that think I am an attorney. Somebody posted online once, they were looking for a special needs attorney, and my name got mentioned, and I said, no, thank you. I said, no, I'm not an attorney, not an attorney. I said, I'm an advocate. I don't want to mislead anybody. There are times when it gets adversarial and they need an attorney, and I'll send them to one, but I'm not going to practice law without a license. The other thing too is that if I can't do something for them, I'll tell them. I had a phone call. A woman called me and she said, can you get my child into private school? And she sounded very enthusiastic. And I said, no, it doesn't work that way. What do you mean? And I explained, and she said, I don't like my child's school. And she mentioned a school district like an hour or so east of me. I don't like my school. I want to put her in private school. And I said, well, there's a whole process to it. And I explained the process. I said, if you want your district to pay for it, you have to take your district to what's called due process. You have to hire an attorney, and it's expensive, it's lengthy, and you have to put up the money, pay up front for at least a year of the private school. I do. I said, yeah. I said, I'm sorry. I felt so bad for her. I said, if I could make it easier, I would. I said, but I said, I'm not going to tell you that I can do something that I can't do. She was so disappointed. Okay.
Let me ask you this, a couple questions about that. So the parents contact you, they either have an IP or they don't. If not, you advise them to get that process rolling for the IP.
Mm-hmm.
Then if they're coming to the meeting, you'll sit in on the meeting, you'll review the notes, you'll go to the meeting or Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're based in New York, but you can consult with people all over America, all over the United
Oh,
States.
yeah.
So you can even sit in meetings virtually.
Sure.
Okay, what happens if you get a family, and I'm sure this happens, where like the mom is like in agreement, but the dad, so the mom and dad are not on the same page, but their child needs. I know sometimes parents are in denial about, I mean, I know an instance right now of a friend who has a child in a preschool setting, and clearly this little boy in the classroom has some serious issues going on. And mom is agreeing to get him evaluated, and dad said, no, absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with this kid. When it's like red flags are dancing all over the place. So
Mm-hmm.
you deal with a situation like that when you have a client that comes to you, wants your help to go to the school system, and advocate for their child, but dad's like, no, we don't need it. We're fine. The kid's fine. What happens? What do you do?
Have that discussion with colleagues. I would not, if there's that much of a disagreement, I'm not going to take that case.
Right. You're not.
I would not. I wouldn't. Somebody that I know who is a special ed lawyer said, well, ask them to show you who has decision-making authority as far as education is concerned.
It's like a divorced family. We're talking about
Yeah, right, if it's a divorced family.
mom, like
Um,
situation, mom's all for it, but dad's like, no, he's fine. So then the lawyer's recommending you find out which one of those parents has the authority to make the decision for the education of the child.
right, in a divorce. This is one of my special ed lawyer who's local to me said that. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I I did agree with that advice. I don't now, because I think that even if something is on paper, I wouldn't take the case. I did have a phone call from a mother where the parents, they were not divorced, and I think they lived under the same roof,
Okay.
but she agreed and he didn't. And it turned out that it was during the summer, and I was not feeling well. I had just broken my toe and I was in a lot of pain. And I just had to take a few days off. So I wasn't taking that case anyway. And I said, you know what? I'm not taking that case because they're going to, everything was an argument in
Yeah.
terms of that family. I'm not, if I see any fissures, any kind of, and any trouble on the horizon, I'm not going to take the case. Another thing as well is if someone says to me, well, I want to hire you, but my mother is paying for my mother is paying your fee, so she wants to know everything. No, you know what? No, I mean, families and money get very, money is it's a hot issue. Unless somebody signed a release, a time limited release saying, I authorize my mother, Jane Smith, to have information, I'm not taking that either. I won't.
But you have to be careful about HIPAA violations too. You can't be telling information to
Right.
breaking.
That's actually, it's HIPAA's counterpart in education is FERPA. So it's that, but that's what it is. I would sign it, but quite frankly, I'm not. I don't want to have that. I don't want to do that.
If a family cannot be on the same page as to, and bottom line, it's what is in the best interest of the child. It's not about dad agreeing or not agreeing or mom agreeing and agreeing. It's like, whoa, this is our child, and we need to do what's best for the child. Whether, and maybe I don't think there is anything wrong, but at least let's explore. You know what I mean? Like, let's give the child the benefit of the doubt and figure out what's going on here. So you're right. It's not worth the time you're going to have to invest in managing their disagreements or their disruption to try to figure this out for the family, for the child. It's not worth it.
No, I'm not. I'm not. And right, because it's enough of a stressor to 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 deal with the district and in certain cases. Now, one of my colleagues who is I respect more than I can say mentions talks about that when we have all of our ducks in a row, that the IEP meeting is, we don't have to be stressed out in the meeting. And I understand what certainly I understand what she's saying, and she's absolutely right. If we have the documentation and we have the data on our side, obviously things are going to go much better. With that said, and I said this to her and I had disagreed with her, with that said, personalities are personalities. And if you have someone who's an administrator who is just argumentative, or is having a bad day, it can still be a stressful meeting. I, as a parent, have never I have never found it smooth sailing. Never. Never.
Especially when you're saying to an administrator, but by federal law, you're required to provide these services. And the administrator is going, that's great, but we don't have money in our budget. The school system doesn't give us money. And so then it comes down to money sometimes, quite honestly,
It
because
always comes down, always money,
yeah,
always money.
and they get agitated because, oh, here we go. Now we have to provide this for this child. We don't have the money. Where am I supposed to pull the money? Who am I pulling the money from? And then no wonder they get argumentative sometimes. And I will tell you, my sister told me this years ago. She taught kindergarten, and she had a child in her class that she clearly realized there was some issues. And there was an IEP meeting, and my sister was heading into the IEP meeting, and the assistant principal called her over and said, if the parent doesn't mention that they want these services, don't tell them about them, because they didn't want to have to pay. And my sister was appalled because here she has a child at home with special needs, and she's being told, like, don't tell the parent. And of course, she went and told the parent on the slide, like, you need to ask for these things. But I mean, that's a reality of what happens a lot of times. The school's like, if they don't know, we're not telling them because they don't have the money. They don't want to have to provide the services. So that's why people find somebody like you. And I mean, there are a couple of special advocates, special needs advocates I follow on Facebook as well, or Instagram. And it's the same stories. Same stories. And they're doing this, they're saying the same things like you're saying. You have rights. Your child has rights. You have to know and you have to ask for these rights. And you can't take no for an answer all the time. You can appeal, you can fight back. You don't have to settle, right?
Yeah.
But you have to know what you don't know. And so that's where someone like you comes in. But let me ask you this. So you're private, so people have to pay you out of pocket to do this for them. Do you ever get
Mhm.
people going, man, you're expensive, or I can't afford that? Or what do you say when they come? Because I hear that too with some of my services. But what's your response to that?
During COVID, someone said to me, "We're in the middle of COVID. You should do this for free."
Good one. Good.
And, and I said, "Well, I said, this is a service and I work very hard for this." And I said, there is a public agency that I referred her to the public agency that we have locally that, and even they're not for free because if one of their advocates goes to a meeting with you, they charge you. It's a nominal fee, but they do charge you. And I said, well, I said that is always a choice. I said, or going on to Facebook, or that's always a choice. And she said but she was on a roll. All these services should be for free. For people who say, I can't afford you, I say, I don't do any kind of sales pitch. I say, yeah, I commiserate. And I say, yes, life is expensive. I said, but I'm here if you change your mind. And so that's really,
Your response.
and yeah, that's my response.
They're not only buying your services, they're buying your years of experience,
Yes.
your knowledge, and that is where the power is. Because you know how to navigate the system, you know the ins and outs, you know the laws, you know what they don't know. So you're educating the parent as well as sometimes educating the school system at the same time. So they're buying years and years and years and years of expertise. And there's value in that. And I do the same thing. People, like I had one lady, I did public speaking around the country years ago. And I had one lady say to me, wow, I really can't afford your fee. I'll let you stay in my house for free. And we'll do this. I said, you know what? I appreciate all that, but maybe you could partner with another agency and split my fee, or maybe you can just put me on reserve maybe for next year when you can, contact me again next year when you can afford to have me come and speak to your audience or whatever. And not apologetic, but I know the value of my expertise and what I have to offer. And the same thing with you. And sometimes parents can pay for it for you, and sometimes they can't. And then, you're nice enough to refer them to a public agency that can help them.
Yeah, I did. What I was doing it then, what I'm doing now is that I'm sending them to my Facebook page and so I send them to my Facebook page and to threads and to my videos that I've done.
Good.
I've also referred them to Pete Wright, the lawyer that I was mentioning a minute ago. I've told them go to his newsletter. You'll get an education. You'll be there for 2 hours. You'll get an education. By the way, when with talking to the administrators in terms of federal law, one of the things that Pete Wright says is he advises parents and the advocates to not directly quote federal law at them, but to kind of play like, like I'm a babe in the woods, like I'm innocent, like, oh, well, help me figure it out. And isn't it? And then you're gently throwing it in, and they get very annoyed.
Yes, because the whole point of this is hopefully when you're going to work on behalf of a family and a child with the school system, it's not adversarial. It's, like I said, team approach. Okay, we've got it. The best interest of this child are what we all should be focusing on, and make sure they get the services they need and everything that they need is provided for them, not a problem. But that's not reality a lot of the time.
No,
A lot
it's
of time
not.
going into a situation where it is contentious, it is adversarial. The school does not want to have to pay for another daggone thing they don't have the money for. And then you're coming in as an advocate saying, "Oh, yes, you do." Because let me get this straight. Wasn't that federal law? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they say? And so sometimes you have to sugarcoat it and kind of, get your point across. But it's not always happy, happy for everybody. It's not always like win-win. Sometimes it's like you're bucking the system and they don't like it, but they have to provide. That's just the way it is. So to have somebody with your skills, your knowledge, your background that could go to the parents, basically sit back, I've got this. I mean, that's priceless. You can't put a price on that. You really can't, because what you do, like I said in the very beginning, and to kind of wrap this all back around the beginning, is what you do is going to have an impact on that child for life, for life. I mean, I see it with my sister's son, and I see all the advocacy she's done with him and all the things she's had to do for him. And it impacts not only the family, the parents, but that child. It can make a difference in that child's entire life. And that's powerful. That's just powerful. And it's worth every penny you charge, as far as I'm concerned, because what are they going to do otherwise? Imagine if they don't have services like that and their child doesn't get their needs met. Imagine the lifelong impact of that.
You know what? Here's my response to that. We have, and you're probably aware, we have a real literacy crisis in America right now, and these children, they cannot read, and unfortunately, the undiagnosed dyslexic students grow into dyslexic adults, and many of them are in jail
Yeah,
with the comorbidities of ADHD and dyslexia. They're in jail.
that's what I'm
Um,
that's what I'm talking about. They maybe were not diagnosed. They didn't have anybody who knew. Maybe their parents didn't know to advocate for them, or didn't realize they even had an issue, that they had dyslexia. Maybe it wasn't diagnosed till later in life. And there's the lifelong impact that can happen. That's why I say, it's like, God bless you for the work that you do for these.
Thank you.
And I know you have wonderful success stories, I'm sure. People need to find you. Tell us again where they can find you on Facebook at Special Needs Pro.
At Special Needs Pro, and on my website, www.specialneedspro.net.
Okay, .net. And then they can find you on Threads under Special Needs Pro, or under your name.
Special Needs Pro. Yeah, under Special Needs Pro.
Okay. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for being here today. I'm pumped for what you do.
Oh, thank
I
you.
personally get this. I totally get this. You've been on the teacher side, I've been on the parent side. I totally get it. And so I think what you do is so valuable, and just keep fighting. I mean, just keep fighting and advocating for these kids and these families, because what you do is powerful.
Thank you. I will. I will.
Awesome. Awesome. It's been good talking to you.
Same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Common Sense Parenting with Pam. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please leave a review. That helps other parents find us. And if you have friends who also have children and could use some parenting tips, feel free to share this. I would really appreciate it. And I love to hear from you, so you can always find me on my socials. And until then, remember, hug and love your baby.